Hey Scott, here's a small question for live YouTube, if you feel like responding. So, the deeper I go into the feelings and the more opened I am to see my traumas and to process them, the more I learn deeper and deeper compassion and love with myself. Just so you know the background, this person is in training. And so she went from working with certain teachers, I know her background, and then some trauma and a repression was evident in her body, and she was getting stuck on those paths, those non-dual paths, with teachers who she said couldn't help her. She came to the Kilby inquiries, and then through the somatic-based inquiry, she's able to go deeper, as she says. And there's more open, there's an opening here happening for her. So there's the background. This is not someone who's just doing work, dabbling with this work on the edges. She's in training, going deep, and shifting the way that she processes things. So here's what she's saying. The more I don't understand how could my Advaita teachers give those guidances to me when I shared my struggles with them and I was asking for support and guidance. And I know that they had seen much more clearly what is happening in my system than I had. I don't get it. I don't want to go that direction and analyze it and keep anything just to have someone to blame. I really don't want. But I couldn't talk with Muji for 2 years, and since July with my sister either. It just keeps popping up in my mind more and more often. I feel that they, my teachers, left me alone in the hardest times. I know it's not only about it. I'm not sure what she says there. So I just don't get it. I want to get it and understand, and I know their perspective and from where they are looking. Yet I couldn't understand so far. When I think about it, I just get disappointed and a little bit angry, maybe. The one thing I don't do is I don't generally call out teachers by name because then it makes it really personal. And you called a teacher out, that is you saying that. Um, so what I'm about to say is not about that particular teacher. I just don't have any personal dog in the fight. Just from years of doing shadow work and inquiry, it's like I feel at peace with what all the teachers are doing. But at the same time, I want to be able to express myself here without feeling apologetic. And so I will. A lot of teachers, including me, when we first have a realization, the realization is so powerful that we feel drawn to help people. And it's very innocent. It's like our suffering, large chunks of it just falls away and we start living in that awareness and we realize that other people aren't living there and we know that we can help them. It's really very innocent. Now, I understand that certain teachers might get overtaken by money or fame or, various scandalous things. Those things happen. But generally, the teachers that I know and have met, their heart is in the right place. My heart was in the right place. But I think that they sometimes get a little bit, one thing is we get a little bit too anxious to go out and share a message about awakening before we've really sat with it, not only in our own experience, but working with people one on one to find out what their actual struggles are, to really sit down and learn by embodiment. What is so the awakening happens, what else is going to happen after that? Is there anything else that I need to learn or embody around this? But but instead of doing that, we get a little anxious, frankly, coming from a good place, wanting to help people. So it seems innocent. But then once you go out and share a message as a non-dual teacher, and your message is sort of one thing where the emphasis is on awareness, and maybe you limit your teaching just to that, like recognizing awareness, kind of the standard non-dual stuff. Once you put out a teaching like that, it's kind of like you're in that. Um, that's a limitation, actually, because if something else unfolds on the path, if you learn, if there are different insights or realizations, they may not fit within your the paradigm of your teaching because it's something new arising. And but it's yet it's hard to change that as you go because people, think of your teaching as one thing. So if you start talking about something else, some teachers will think, well, that's getting off the point. I need to stick to what I do best, which is pointing to the non-dual. I don't need to be concerned about this whole trauma thing or addiction, because again, they've presented their teaching a certain way, and in that way doesn't make room for these other things. I did that. But one thing that I did through the years is develop inquiries that allow me to go deeper in my own experience. So in going deeper, I learned how to adjust what I was saying to meet the different insights and realizations that were showing up for me and the people that I work with. So the teaching that I put out in the world has been rather flexible and has evolved over time. So it's not difficult for me then to talk about these issues that 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 weren't met for you with these teachers, because this is what I've been doing for years, is letting this work evolve to meet people's actual experience. So there's that. Just coming out too soon and not letting and sitting with the realization, and maybe coming out with a more mature view of things later if you sit with it, but we get too anxious. The other thing is that certain teachers may just be blind to their own stuff. Like, I don't want to call anyone out, but just I've heard stories of teachers who they definitely have some contraction or repression or shadow or unresolved trauma, but because their teaching doesn't talk about that, they haven't been able to discover it in themselves. So they may have a ferocious addiction over here, or a trauma that keeps coming up every now and then, but they keep quiet about it, or something still going on for them, but they just don't share about it because there's no room for it. Because in their teaching, they talk about all there is this pristine awareness, and everything else just comes and goes. Is It's nothing. It's insubstantial. Well, so if a teacher deals with something that is substantial in their life, like I've seen teachers go back into depression, that chronic pain can happen, addictions. I've talked about the resurfacing of trauma with certain teachers that I personally know. If they don't have a way of dealing with that for themselves, they're not going to have a way to help you, right? There's no way that they're going to be able to help you if they're not helping themselves in these areas. So when I think about the teacher that you're with, and you started showing all these signs that there was something that needed to be embodied, there was unresolved trauma or whatever else. Again, if the teacher hasn't gone there, they can't take you there. It's that simple. And for a teacher who has taught a certain way, it's actually difficult to veer off of that, to start talking about these things without losing their primary message about awakeness or whatever. And so they might think that they're just being clear, right? So they're just pointing you back to the original insights and pointers, like your only awareness, that thought isn't you, because they think they're being clear and helping you. But the problem is that not everything can be dealt with those pointers. And this is exactly what I've been saying and what this person is saying, that these kind of standard non-dual pointers are not even designed necessarily to uproot, see, and dissolve trauma. They're not designed for that, to go into the unconscious. They're not designed to pull up repression. That isn't the aim of the teaching. The aim, according to the teachers, would be just to remain clear on the main point, which is that you are awareness. Everything arises and falls to you. The one fundamental problem with that is that not everything arises and falls to awareness. This is the thing I've been saying. None of that accounts for the unconscious, for the repression. Repressions don't just arise and fall to awareness. If you're repressing something, anger, emotion, a trauma, anything, by the very nature of repression, it's not going to arise and fall. So any teaching that talks about just being with whatever arises and falls and being the awareness will miss that, because that stuff doesn't come up. So if they keep coming back to the pointer, your awareness, just see things coming and going, That's going to be a big miss for them and for you when it comes to something that's unconscious, that's held in the body somewhere, like trauma. Certain teachers go even further to say, don't even worry about the past or the future. Don't go pulling up the things from the past. If you can hear what they're saying, they're simply sticking to their main party line, which is the past is just thoughts appearing to present awareness, remain as the awareness. So, again, that's just more of the same teaching. The problem with that is the past, just as they say, is actually nothing more than thought connected to feeling or sensation arising now to present awareness. That's correct. The problem is the past, a lot of it is hidden. So you won't even know this until you go into deep somatic inquiry. You won't even know, for example, all of what you've come to believe, your conditioning, if you completely shut out the past entirely. So the other thing is the body keeps the score. So we now know this. A lot of these teachings, even modern day non dual teachings, they have their roots in past traditions that go back all the way like a few thousand years. If you go back that far, we were not trauma informed. We did not understand how the nervous system works. We didn't understand the physiological component of addiction. We didn't understand any of that. So some of these teachings that are just continuing to pull from the tradition will just miss that piece of it. That's all. They just haven't integrated that piece. So the whole trauma thing and what we've learned about the somatic that has happened in the last 20 or 30 years just gets missed because the teachers keep pulling from the same tradition. Like that didn't wasn't aware of that to begin with. See, so it's almost like a narrow, very limited view of things to be thinking that your tradition can answer everything when science and other folks have discovered other things about our experience. So it's like working with an old toolbox that's really effective, but it's just missing certain really important tools. It's like having your, and then you keep, it's like you're your teacher. Here's my toolbox. This is going to help everybody. Let me show you these tools. And then someone comes up with like trauma held in the body or something that's unconscious. And it's like, I don't have a tool for that. I don't have one for that. So let me just give you one of my old tools, your awareness. See the thoughts coming and going in you. You're not the thoughts. That's just use the tools I have. I know that it's frustrating. Yes, I know it is frustrating. The thing about it is if you're in a teaching or a therapy or a tradition that isn't meeting you with your suffering in a skillful way, isn't actually meeting you where you're at, right where you're at, then just move on. If you keep going back, this is why I talk about teacher projections, where if we didn't get what we needed from our parents, we start looking for that from a teacher and we start projecting things onto them and then we're very drawn to them because of that projection or that transference. That can get in the way when it comes time to discern whether this is the right path for you. Because if you're not being met, if your suffering is not being met skillfully, then you're going to have to leave. But if you have this strong projection where you keep looking as if the teacher, they have something, I need that and I can't leave, you see how that's going to get in the way. This is why I tell people to do work on teacher projection early on before you step into anything, including this work, because that projection can keep you there long after the usefulness of the teaching has worn out. Being able to discern and leave a practice is important. I don't know what to tell you in terms of why teachers ignore or are not able to access this stuff. Some of them are. There are some good ones out there. When I think of like Judith Blackstone, I don't know a lot about hers, but I've heard good things. Reggie Ray has apparently an embodiment approach to his work. There are definitely other ones, so I don't want to lump them all together. But you know these teachers by their fruits. So if you just pay attention, you'll learn everything you need to know. So if you start asking them questions about, well, what about where science is saying that the body holds on to all these things from the past, like at a somatic level or even a cellular level? If you start quoting science or quoting some of the newer insights and your teacher just looks at you and says something like, a cellular memory happening to who? You see, that's not that's not skillful. So just asking your question, not to be an asshole about it, like not like I'm gonna interrogate you, but just to ask a few questions like about things that you're discovering. Like if you see in your own experience that resting is awareness, that there's still an identification on the body level. For example, like a tight stomach or something. If you go to that teacher and if all they say is, well, that contraction is arising to no one, what is it that's looking at that? That's okay as a really elementary pointer at that level, but think about what the teacher's really saying. It's a big miss, actually, because these contractions, these areas of the body, they're not just sensation. If you do this work long enough, you know that in those sensations there's a network of unconscious thoughts connected to it. This is what this work has shown us all. So when a teacher says, just see that the contraction is not you, or that you are the awareness, or that this is happening to no one, it's a big miss because in that sensation, again, are a bunch of unconscious stories of identification going back to traumatic relationships, responses to a mother, father, other traumatic experiences, repression of emotion in order to stay safe as a child, all that tucked away in that, all that. And then the teacher says, just see that that's not happening to anyone. That's just so unskillful because when you go into those sensations, you find that there are strong thoughts of identification that you can't even see when you're just resting as no one. Because when you're resting with no one, there's just this contraction that's hiding a bunch of stuff. So to say that's not you is putting the cart before the horse because inside the contraction are lots of thoughts about you and what happened to you. So the more skillful thing would be to show someone how to access those thoughts and then see that they're not you, but not to just dismiss the entire body. This is the thing I see in non-duality is like the body just gets wrapped up into this one pointer. What we know about the body now from science and trauma research is that the body is like a complex universe of networks. There's a lot going on down here. So when these kinds of issues are met with these pointers that just say, well, see that you're not the body. Okay, let's go into that. Teacher, take me into that. Show me that I'm not the body. What can happen is that you can have a momentary unhooking from believing that you have a body, but this energy still stores the information of the trauma and the repression. So even that moment where it feels like there's nobody there, it's likely to contract right back in just a little while because of all the unconscious stuff in there that isn't being accessed. This is what I experience with what I call satsang syndrome, where you'll go to a retreat on a weekend. This used to happen to me all the time. People would go to another teacher's retreat and they would have those aha moments where the teacher's pointing skillfully to awareness being all there is. And then somewhere that body identification pointer comes in and it's like they're just living in pure awareness there. And it's like they're not identified with the body or with anything, and they think they've discovered it. And then about 2 or 3 days later after the retreat, I would get these phone calls. It's like I had this clear seeing that I'm even not my body, like none of it is real, and that but now I'm crashing. So the crashing is the contracting back of that stuff that you bypassed. That's what that is. Or not necessarily bypass, is that you can't expect some one experience just to knock all that away. So whatever has been undealt with will contract back. But if you don't have the skill to meet it, then it's just going to contract back. And so you have to meet it every time it contracts back skillfully. Without that kind of instruction, this is what people are experiencing is like a crash. As it contracts back, I've lost it. The realization I've lost it. And that can send them back to retreats and satsangs in a compulsive manner in order to get what they feel like they got there. But just like with any drug, when they leave, as that contraction comes back, it's like a withdrawal. And then the mind goes, where do I go get my fix? Oh, to the next retreat. So then you're in this cycle of unskillfulness. Having peak experiences and crashing, peak experiences and crashing, there has to be a learning in that. It can't just be having experiences and crashing. You have to be learning by witnessing and inquiring what is it that's contracting back? What is it in my system that wants to survive? And what's the utility around the survival? What am I still believing, in other words, to meet it with that kind of skill? The body keeps the score. And if there's one area where we're really seeing that that's true, it's in spiritual circles because the body is keeping the score. Each time you go to that retreat and contract back, the body's telling you there's more to learn and discover here, but you're missing it. So there has to be a learning process, learning of what it is that I'm believing that makes this energy contract back. And the only way to access this, you can't go back to the pointer, just be with what is, because what's contracting that back is unconscious. It's a survival strategy or a trauma response that's below the surface of your awareness, and it's held in the body. It's mind and body, but the mind is very unconscious around this. And all the body does is it shows you a contraction coming back. So it's all unconscious. So to go back and then just get pointed to there's no self, there's no body, doesn't deal with that mechanism very skillfully because there's no discovering of the unconscious material that's creating the contracting back. Once you discover that unconscious material through inquiry, then you have a shot of truly allowing that contraction to open and resolve itself fully and finally, because you're finally getting to the unconscious stuff, the stuff that your teacher didn't take you into or couldn't. See, I don't think that there's any teachers out there that literally know how to access this unconscious, these repressions, and then just refuse to do it with you. I don't know. My sense is that they don't know how to access it because I didn't know how to access it up until like 3 or 4 years ago. I really didn't know how to access this deeper unconscious stuff. So I assume that many of them are like where I was. So when someone comes to them, they can just use the pointers that they have, but they don't have anything in this area for you. Because again, this is repression, unconscious stuff. And the Advaita teachings deal with what's conscious mainly, with what is showing up in awareness, not with what's not showing up in awareness, but that you're feeling as a body. I hope I've said enough there. Have compassion. This person said they have compassion. Just know that most people are doing the best they can, including teachers, with the level of consciousness that they have and the level of skill that they have right now, and they can't do anything better than that. Just like I can only do what I can do here.